Let's be honest, have you ever thought about giving up on life, even though you believe in God? Yes, I know, this is controversial. This sounds wrong, but it's the truth for many people. Perhaps your truth. You believe, you pray, you even try to keep your head high. But inside, you're exhausted. And as much as you fight not to admit it, there are days when the desire to disappear wins. Not to die exactly, but to erase everything, to stop feeling, to rest from carrying this weight that nobody sees. And that's when the shock comes. Even Jesus went through this. Yes, he also wanted to stop, but nobody talks about this side. They talk about the Jesus who multiplied loaves, the one who healed, who calmed storms, who resurrected the dead. But almost no one talks about the anguished, breathless, exhausted man, who cried alone, who felt fear, who screamed for help and heard silence, who asked not to have to move forward. This changes everything. Because maybe you're feeling guilty for thinking about giving up. Maybe they think it's a lack of faith. Maybe they tell you that you're in sin for feeling this way. But what if I told you that the greatest example of faith who ever walked this earth also had a moment when he wanted to stop? The difference? He didn't stop, even in pain, even without strength, even without support, even wanting to run away. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. If you're at your limit, if your soul is tired, if you've prayed asking for strength and it seems like nothing came, stay with me until the end. This video could be the turning point. Here you won't hear ready-made phrases like, God is in control or it will pass. Here we're going to talk about what almost no one has the courage to say, that there are moments when faith hurts, that there are nights when the sky seems empty, and that there are days when even the strongest fall apart. But we'll also talk about the answer, about what Jesus did in these moments, about the actions he took when everything inside of him screamed for rest, and how this can change the course of your life right now. Perhaps you don't know, but this struggle you're living now is not the end of your story, and you didn't come to this video by chance. You were brought here because you need to hear what comes next. You need to understand that the exhaustion that suffocates you today has been felt before, and that there is a real, possible, and transformative path to cross this valley. I'm not here to judge you, nor to push you up with cheap motivational phrases. I'm here to walk with you through the pain, because it's there, in the depths of the broken soul, that rebirth begins. And at the end of this video, I'll show you a guide that I prepared with great care, material made especially for those who feel they are losing the strength to continue. A path, a light, a step-by-step to rediscover meaning and move forward. It's in the first link in the description, but I ask you, don't go now. Listen to everything first, because before getting this guide, you need to catch your breath, you need to breathe again, and you need to hear from someone who has faced the worst, that yes, it is possible to continue. You may be without hope, but there's still something lit inside you, even small, even weak, and that flame is all you need to start over. Today you'll discover that the desire to give up is not your end, it's your calling, a cry from the soul saying that something needs to change, and that you weren't created to live like this, suffocated, tired, surviving. Jesus felt what you're feeling, and for that very reason, he is the only one who can teach you how to go through this pain, not with magic, but with truth, with depth, with humanity. If you've ever wanted to stop, if you've ever thought, I can't take it anymore, then you need to listen to what comes in the next few minutes. This is your chance to understand what no one explained to you, to be seen, heard, embraced, without masks, without demands. Allow yourself to listen, allow yourself to feel, and especially, allow yourself to continue, because even Jesus wanted to stop, but he didn't stop. And because of that, today, you can rise up. And even when you try to move forward, it seems like the world doesn't cooperate. It's as if each step requires an absurd effort. Getting out of bed becomes a heroic act. Fulfilling simple tasks transforms into an internal battle. The body is functioning, but the soul is on the ground. There are moments when the exhaustion isn't just physical. It's that fatigue that penetrates your bones, that invades your mind, that haunts your spirit. There are people who look at you and say it's all in your head, that it's drama, that it's lack of faith, that you just need to think positively, that others have worse problems. Words that cut deep when you're already bleeding inside. Phrases that weigh like stones when you can barely carry your own body, but only you know what you're experiencing inside. And sometimes, even you can't explain it. It's a tightness in your chest that doesn't go away, an anxiety that arrives without reason, a discouragement that drags on for days, weeks, months, a desire to disappear, not to get attention but to try to breathe again. It's that internal silence that screams louder than any sound. It's that loneliness that remains even in the midst of a crowd. It's that emptiness that nothing seems to fill. And the worst part is that you try. You try to react. You put on a worship song. You read a motivational message. You try to pray. You seek that word that comforted you before. But it seems like the words won't come out. Your heart is too cluttered. Your mind too confused. Your faith too shaky. It's like screaming with your mouth closed. Like running in soft sand. Like asking for help in a place where no one hears. Like trying to light a match underwater. Your strength ran out halfway through the journey. And now, each movement is a struggle against the desire to simply give up. And then comes the guilt. A guilt that consumes you from within. Because you believe in God. You grew up hearing that those who have faith are strong. That those who trust don't get discouraged. That those who pray receive answers. That God's plans are perfect. But now you're there, sinking, questioning, doubting, trembling, and asking yourself, is my faith really that small? You know, not everything that exhausts you comes from outside. Much of it comes from within, from the effort of keeping everything standing, from the demand to always be well, from the pressure you place on your own shoulders, from the I'm fine mask you wear daily. It's the weight of feeling you need to be an example. It's the weight of thinking you can't fail. It's the weight of believing your pain is less than others. It's the weight of pretending you're steady when inside you're crumbling, and you kept enduring, swallowing, keeping quiet, smiling so as not to worry anyone, saying everything is fine when in truth, everything is falling apart, singing praises with your mouth while your heart wept in silence, until one day the body speaks, the mind screams, the spirit calls for help, and you find yourself face to face with your own fragility, because there are limits we cannot exceed. There are burdens we weren't made to carry alone. There are pains that need to be shared. There are weaknesses that need to be admitted. But let me ask you, who said you need to be strong all the time? Who convinced you that showing exhaustion is failure? Who taught you that crying is shameful? Who planted in you the idea that doubting is sinning? Jesus wept. Jesus was distressed. Jesus felt fear. Jesus sweat blood. Jesus asked for the cup to pass. Jesus questioned the Father's abandonment. Jesus fell under the weight of the cross. And yet, he wasn't weak. On the contrary, he was human, fully human as you are. He knew what real exhaustion was. He felt physical pain on his back. But more than that, he felt on his back the weight of rejection, misunderstanding, betrayal, loneliness, the mission that seemed too big to carry. In Gethsemane, he experienced fear in its purest form. On the cross, he knew abandonment in its cruelest expression. In Jerusalem, he lived through the rejection of those who had previously acclaimed him. In his journey, he felt the misunderstanding even of those closest to him. And do you know what's beautiful about this? He didn't hide it, didn't disguise it, didn't pretend everything was right, didn't mask his humanity with false spirituality. Jesus allowed himself to experience pain, allowed himself to express fear, allowed himself to question the Father's silence, allowed himself to fall under the weight of the cross. And even so, he continued, because he knew that going through pain is different from denying it exists, that facing fear is different from pretending it isn't there, that questioning isn't the opposite of trusting, that falling doesn't mean giving up, and perhaps this is your mistake, trying to escape what you feel, trying to control what crushes you, trying to hide what hurts you, trying to appear strong when in reality you're falling apart, when in reality what you need most right now is to allow yourself to feel, allow yourself to admit that it hurts, allow yourself to recognize that it's difficult, allow yourself to say you don't understand, allow yourself to breathe, allow yourself to say, today I can't handle it, allow yourself to fall to your knees, not to surrender to the problem, but to meet God in the midst of weakness, because it's there, on the ground, with your face wet with tears, with your heart exposed, with empty hands, that you often find God in a way you never find when you're strong. God isn't impressed by your strength, by your perfect praises, by your eloquent prayers, by your flawless testimony, but he is moved by your sincerity, that prayer that comes without words, only with tears, that outpouring you only make in the silence of the night, that urge to scream, but which comes out as a sigh, that I don't understand but I want to trust whispered between sobs. All of this, he hears, even if no one else listens, even if no one else understands. even if no one else values it. Pain may isolate you from people. It may drive away those who only want to be around during joy. It may reveal the superficiality of many relationships. It may show that not everyone is willing to descend into the valley with you, but it never isolates you from God. Never. In fact, it's precisely in pain that He often makes Himself most present, not to immediately remove you from it, not to give you quick answers, not to offer magical solutions, but to be with you, there, at the bottom of the pit, in the darkness of the valley, in the midst of the storm. That's how Psalm chapter 34 verse 18 tells us, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." It's not that He is only close to those who are well, those who are firm, those who never fall. He is especially close to the brokenhearted, to the downcast, to those who feel they can't go on, to those who have reached their limit. And in this moment, even if you don't feel anything, even if it seems like heaven is silent, even if the answers don't come, even if the pain doesn't pass, He is there, present, steady, silent, perhaps, but never distant. There is a passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 where Paul speaks about a thorn in the flesh, something that tormented him, that made him feel weak, that led him to beg 3 times for God to remove it. And God's response? "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." It wasn't what Paul wanted to hear. It wasn't the answer he expected. It wasn't the solution he desired, but it was the truth that transformed him. And that's why he continues, "Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses so that Christ's power may rest on me. For when I am weak, then I am strong." What a paradox, isn't it? When I am weak, then I am strong. It's as if God turns the table, as if He rewrites the rules, as if He shows us that in the kingdom the values are different, that strength is not the absence of weakness, that courage is not the absence of fear, that faith is not the absence of doubt, but rather the ability to continue even when we feel all these things. The wait may continue, the storm may not pass now, the path may remain steep, the night may extend, but that doesn't mean you're alone in the midst of it. That doesn't mean there's no hope. That doesn't mean everything will remain this way forever. Sometimes all you need is to know that you don't have to carry this without company, that the same God who felt pain knows yours, that the same Christ who wept understands your tears, that the same Spirit who intercedes for us with groans that words cannot express, Romans chapter 8 verse 26, speaks for you when you can't find words. Jesus fell and rose, not because He didn't feel anything, not because He ignored the pain, not because He was superhuman, but because He knew that pain wasn't the end. It was the crossing. It was the path. It was part of the greater purpose. And maybe what you're living through now is exactly that. A valley, a crossing, a dark time that seems endless, a desert that seems to have no end, a night that seems to give no way to dawn. But believe, even in this dark place, there is a light. Even in this desert, there is an oasis. Even in this night, there are stars guiding the way. It doesn't shout, doesn't burst like fireworks, doesn't appear like a luminous billboard. It shines low, almost imperceptible, like embers under ashes, like a small flame resisting the wind. But it's there, waiting for you to take the next step, even if trembling, even if slowly, even if crying, even if doubting. You don't need to run. You don't need to put on a show of overcoming. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to feel strong all the time. You just need to continue, one day at a time, one breath at a time, one tear at a time, one step at a time. There is a profound beauty in the simple act of persisting, not in heroic persistence full of bravery and determination, but in silent, fragile, wavering persistence, the one that crawls when it cannot run, the one that whispers when it cannot shout, the one that clings to a spark when it cannot see the sunlight. This is how the psalmist reminds us, "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Psalm chapter 23 verse 4. Notice, he doesn't say, "Even though I quickly pass through the valley," doesn't say, "Even though I fly over the valley," doesn't say, "Even though I go around the valley." He says, "Even though I walk through the valley." Walk, step by step, slowly, crossing through, not avoiding, facing, not fleeing. And what sustains him is not his own strength, not the certainty that the valley will end soon, not the absence of fear. It's the presence of God. "For you are with me," not because I am strong, not because I have all the answers, not because I never doubt, not because I always understand divine purposes, but simply because He is there, walking by your side, sometimes carrying you, sometimes in silence, sometimes speaking through other people, sometimes manifesting in nature, sometimes touching your heart in ways you cannot explain. And with time, without realizing, this weight that today seems unbearable will begin to lose strength. Not because you became stronger, not because you discovered the secret formula, not because you finally understood everything, but because you will have discovered something that the whole world tries to hide. That true strength is born in the moment you admit you are weak. That true faith was revealed when you confess your doubts. That true hope arises when you face despair head-on. That the true encounter with God happens when you allow yourself to be human. Isaiah chapter 40 verse 31 tells us, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." Notice the order. First comes the waiting. Then comes the renewal of strength. Then comes the soaring like eagles. Then comes the running without exhaustion. And only then comes the walking without fatigue. Waiting on the Lord. It's not a passive waiting with arms crossed. It's an active, expectant, confident waiting. It's remaining, even when everything in you wants to flee. It's trusting, even when everything seems to contradict that trust. It's waiting, even when time seems to stand still. And it's in this waiting that strength is renewed. It's in this apparent doing nothing that something powerful happens inside you, like a seed that, buried in darkness, silently prepares to break through to the surface, like a butterfly in the cocoon, apparently motionless but going through a complete transformation, like winter which seems sterile, but prepares the soil for spring's explosion. So, my friend, if today you feel at the bottom of the pit, if today the exhaustion seems greater than your strength, if today the desire to give up knocks at your door, if today the tears seem endless, if today faith seems so small that you can barely see it, know that this doesn't define you, doesn't diminish your value, doesn't nullify your story, doesn't cancel your calling, doesn't disqualify your faith. It only proves that you are human as Jesus was, as needful of grace as anyone else, as worthy of love as you've always been. And maybe at this exact moment you just need to hear, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to doubt. It's okay to fall. It's okay to need help, because it's precisely there, in the recognition of your humanity, your limitation, your need, that you find space to experience the divinity, the infinity, and the sufficiency of God. As the Apostle Paul wrote, "For when I am weak, then I am strong." Allow yourself to be weak today, so that God's strength may manifest in you. Allow yourself not to have all the answers, so that God's wisdom may be revealed to you. Allow yourself to feel the pain, so that God's comfort may reach you. The sun will rise again. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in the way you expect, but it will rise. And when that day comes, you will look back and understand that even in the darkest moments, even when you couldn't see a hand in front of your face, even when everything seemed lost, you were never alone. And this discovery, this certainty, this profound encounter with a God who doesn't abandon you in the valley, but walks with you through it, will transform your story of pain into a testimony of hope. Because the greatest proof of God's presence isn't in instant miracles, but in the inexplicable strength that allows us to take one more step when we thought we couldn't. And one day, when someone is going through what you're going through today, it will be your voice, marked by experience, by pain, by doubt, but also by hope and grace, that will be able to say, "Continue, one step at a time. I know it hurts. I know it's exhausting. I know it sometimes seems impossible. But there is a dawn after this night, and when it comes you will understand that every tear, every doubt, every moment of weakness was worth it, because after the cross comes the resurrection, after the valley comes the mountain, after the night comes the day, and after the my God, why have you forsaken me, comes the it is finished, the complete work, the fulfilled purpose, the victory achieved, not by our strength, not by our merit, not by our perfection, but by the grace of a God who, through Jesus, knew our pain, carried our burden, and opened a path where there seemed to be no way out. Continue, one step at a time. You are not alone on this journey. And then comes that moment when even God seems distant. It's not just a fleeting feeling, it's an absence that weighs heavy, a vacuum that suffocates, a distance not measured in meters, but in size. You pray, you search for the right words, you try to remember those prayers that worked before, you repeat verses that always brought comfort, but the words seem to hit the ceiling and fall back down, like stones thrown against the sky, like letters returned without being opened, like messages sent that are never read. You close your eyes, try to concentrate, take a deep breath, push away distractions, prepare your heart, but all you find is silence, a deafening silence, a silence that speaks louder than any noise, a silence that echoes off the walls of your soul. Have you experienced this? That sensation of talking to no one, of asking for direction and hearing no response, of crying out for help and not feeling even a sign of presence, of pouring out your heart and receiving only the echo of your own words. It's like being in the desert, not just a physical desert, but a spiritual desert, where each prayer seems to evaporate under the scorching sun of reality, where each step of faith sinks into the quicksand of uncertainty, where each attempt to find God seems to take you further from Him, and then doubt begins to grow, not just as a passing thought, but as a seed that finds fertile soil, a seed that germinates, takes root, grows, and spreads. Does He hear me? Has He forgotten me? Did I do something wrong? Is my faith really that small? Am I being punished? Is all of this just an illusion? Questions you never imagined asking, thoughts that embarrass you, doubts that you hide even from yourself. Gradually, the silence becomes a monster, an echo that fills your days with insecurity, a shadow that follows you wherever you go, an invisible weight on your shoulders. And when prayers seem to have no effect, you begin to quiet down. The prayers become shorter, then more rare, and eventually almost non-existent, not because you want to, not because you decided to abandon faith, not because you chose to turn your back on God, but because you feel like you're talking to yourself, like someone sending messages that are never answered, like someone leaving messages in a voicemail box that no one listens to, like someone seeking connection on a deadline. And this hurts more than any physical pain. It's a pain that medicine cannot reach, a wound that bandages cannot cover, an emptiness that nothing seems to fill, because when even God seems not to be listening, the soul collapses. It's like a building that loses its foundation, like a boat adrift without an anchor, like a bird trying to fly with broken wings. Faith, that which once seemed so solid, now appears as fragile as crystal, and each day of silence is like a blow that threatens to shatter it completely. You don't want to give up on faith, you don't want to drift away, you don't want to abandon what you've always believed. But how do you continue feeling abandoned? How do you persist when each prayer seems to fall into emptiness? How do you trust when silence is the only answer? How do you keep the flame burning when the wind of doubt blows so strongly? And the cruelest part is that nobody talks about this. In church services, you only hear testimonies of victory. In sermons, they only speak of certainties. In songs, they only sing about God's constant presence. Nobody admits it. Nobody confesses they've felt this way. Nobody shares their nights of doubt. Nobody mentions their unanswered prayers, because they taught that true faith never doubts, never wavers, never trembles. That questioning is sin, that uncertainty is weakness, that silence is punishment. But the truth is that the purest faith is that which continues even when you feel nothing. The most authentic faith is that which persists in darkness. The strongest faith is that which survives the desert. Job, the man whom the Bible describes as blameless and upright, went through a devastating silence. He lost everything: possessions, children, health, and when he cried out for answers, the heavens seemed like bronze. For 37 chapters, God doesn't say a word to him. For 37 chapters, Job questions, laments, begs. For 37 chapters, silence is his only companion. And yet, in the midst of pain and abandonment, he declares, "Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him." Job chapter 13, verse 15. This is what few understand. Faith is not the absence of doubts. It's the decision to continue, even when full of them. And yes, there are days when you believe while crying. There are days when you follow, with eyes closed. There are days when your amen tastes like tears. There are days when praise is just a broken sigh. There are days when the only possible prayer is a why. And even then, it's still faith. Perhaps the truest faith you've ever had, because it's not based on emotions. It's not sustained by experiences. It doesn't depend on immediate answers. It's a faith tested in the fire of absence, refined in the crucible of silence, purified in the furnace of waiting. You know what few people have the courage to say? Even Jesus experienced this silence. Jesus, the beloved Son of God. Jesus, who was always in perfect communion with the Father. Jesus, who said, "I and the Father are one." In one of the most anguishing moments of his life, he cried out to heaven, a cry that tore through the heavens and echoed through eternity. My God, why have you forsaken me?" And all he heard was emptiness. No voice, no comfort, no explanation. He was wounded, hanging, bleeding, exposed, ridiculed, agonizing. And in that moment, he felt what perhaps you're feeling now: abandonment, the deepest and most painful abandonment, being left by the one who promised never to leave, and even being who he was, even being the very Son of God, even having lived in perfect obedience. There was no immediate response. There was no voice from the clouds. There was no instant deliverance. There were no angels to comfort him. Just silence. A silence that must have weighed more than the cross itself. A silence that must have hurt more than the nails. A silence that for him represented separation from the Father he loved so much. This teaches something profound, something that comforts, and at the same time confronts. God's silence is not absence. It's presence that transcends human understanding. It's difficult to understand this when you're suffering. It's almost impossible to accept when everything in you begs for a word, a touch, a sign, a manifestation, anything that proves you're not talking to emptiness. But sometimes God is so close that he doesn't need to say anything, like a father watching his child take first steps, like a mother keeping vigil over her sick child's sleep, like a friend who simply holds your hand in moments of pain. He simply is, not as a distant and indifferent presence, but as an intimate and attentive presence. Silent, yes, but real. Invisible, yes, but tangible. In the midst of your crying, in your exhaustion, in your muffled scream into the pillow, in your frustrated attempt to pray, in your going to church where you felt nothing, but went anyway, in your flipping through the Bible seeking a word that speaks to your heart, in your lost gaze toward the sky, looking for signs that don't come. God's silence is not punishment. It's not abandonment. It's not indifference. It's not forgetfulness. It's an invitation to a deeper dimension of faith, an invitation to an intimacy that goes beyond words, an invitation to know him not only as the God who speaks, but as the God who is, so that you seek him, not for what he says, but for who he is, not for the miracles he performs, but for his very essence, not for what he can give you, but for what he already is in himself. Moses spent 40 years in the desert before hearing God in the burning bush. Elijah experienced earthquakes, winds, and fire, but God was in the gentle whisper. Paul spent 3 days in complete darkness before receiving his renewed vision. John, the beloved disciple, was exiled on Patmos before receiving revelation. The desert precedes the promised land. Friday precedes the Sunday of resurrection. Silence precedes the deepest revelation. And perhaps that's what you need at this moment. Not an answer, not an explanation, not an immediate solution, not an instant miracle, but a presence that sustains even when it doesn't resolve, a presence that comforts even when it doesn't explain, a presence that strengthens even when it doesn't remove the problem, even invisible, even imperceptible, even apparently distant, like the air you breathe. You don't see it, but it keeps you alive. Like gravity that holds you. You don't touch it, but it sustains you. Like someone's love for you. You can't prove it, but you feel it. You don't need to feel to know. It's not what you feel that determines what's real. It's not your perception that defines truth. It's not your experience that limits God's action. You don't need to hear to continue. Sometimes, silence teaches more than 1,000 words. Sometimes the absence of response is, in itself, a response. Sometimes not understanding is part of the growth process. You don't need to see to trust. Just as you don't need to see the sun to know it's there, even on cloudy days. Just as you don't need to see the stars to know they continue shining, even when the sky is covered. Just as you don't need to see oxygen to continue breathing. True faith is not believing when everything goes well. It's not trusting when the answers are clear. It's not following when the path is illuminated. It's not praising when miracles happen. Anyone can do that. Anyone can have faith when everything goes right. Anyone can trust God when prayers are answered as we expect. Anyone can follow Jesus when the path is smooth and level. True faith is continuing to walk even when there's no light on the path. It's taking one more step, even when the ground seems to disappear under your feet. It's worshiping, even when your eyes are filled with tears. It's trusting, even when your mind is full of doubts. It's remaining, even when everything in you wants to run. Because true faith is not based on what you see, hear, or feel. It's based on who God is. Unchangeable, faithful, eternal. And He doesn't change according to your circumstances. He doesn't become less God because you're suffering. He doesn't become less present because you don't feel Him. The author of Hebrews tells us that faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1. Certainty of what we don't see, proof of what we don't touch, conviction of what we haven't yet experienced. Perhaps God is silent because He is trusting that you will continue anyway, because He is inviting you to a more mature faith, because He is preparing you for something greater, because He is teaching you to recognize His voice even in silence, not because you are strong, not because you are special, not because you deserve to suffer more than others, but because He has already placed within you everything you need, like a teacher who remains silent during a test, not because he has abandoned the student, but because he trusts that he taught well and that the student is prepared. And if he is quiet, it's because he has already said what was needed in His Word, in His creation, in the counsel of the wise, in past experiences, in the small signs of everyday life, or because He is teaching you to listen to the most difficult sound of all, the sound of trust, the one that can only be heard in the silence of the soul, the one that can only be perceived when all other noises cease, the one that can only be understood when you surrender to waiting. Because faith is not noise, it's not emotion, it's not mystical experience, it's not overwhelming feeling. Faith is constancy. It's that daily decision to follow, even without seeing the path. It's that repeated choice to trust, even without understanding the purpose. It's that quiet determination to remain, even when everything invites surrender. Faith is that small step you take even when tired, that good morning you say to God even when He seems not to answer, that opening of the Bible even when the words seem to make no sense, that going to church even when you feel no desire to be there. It's that small gesture that no one sees, that prayer whispered in traffic, that thank you amid tears, that almost inaudible, help me, that hesitant attempt to trust once more. It's that sigh that substitutes for prayer, but rises to heaven just the same, like the breathing of a baby falling asleep in the parent's arms, like the last breath of one who departs trusting in what they do not see, like the inexpressible groan that the Spirit translates before the Father. God has not abandoned you. Just because you don't hear Him doesn't mean He isn't speaking. Just because you don't feel Him doesn't mean He isn't present. Just because you don't see Him acting doesn't mean He is still. God has not forgotten you. Your name is engraved on the palms of His hands. All your hairs are counted. Your tears are stored in His bottle. God is not far away, for in Him we live and move and exist. Acts chapter 17 verse 28. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. Psalm chapter 34 verse 18. Behold, I am with you always. Matthew chapter 28 verse 20. He is simply teaching you to believe, even without signs, to trust, even without proof, to follow, even without seeing, to persist, even without response, to love, even without return. And believe this, it's in these moments that He works most in you, not just in what you do, but in what you become, not just in external circumstances, but in your internal transformation, not just in solving your problems, but in forming your character, like the sculptor who works silently on stone, like the potter who molds clay with patience, like the refiner who purifies gold in fire, like the vine dresser who prunes branches so they bear more fruit. God's silence is not emptiness. It is pregnant with meaning. It is full of purpose. It is filled with love. And one day, perhaps not today, perhaps not tomorrow, perhaps not in this life, you will look back and see that the moments of greatest silence were, in fact, the moments of greatest presence. The moments when you felt most abandoned were the moments when He carried you most in His arms. The moments when you doubted most were the moments when your faith grew most. Because God's silence is never abandonment. It is always an invitation to a deeper faith, to a more solid trust. There is a type of pain that almost nobody understands. It doesn't show up on medical tests, it isn't visible on your face, but it crushes you from the inside. It's the pain of being left behind. the pain of counting on someone and that person not being there, of believing in a promise and it never being fulfilled, of hearing, "You can count on me," and then being ignored, forgotten, left hanging. Maybe you've already been through this, or maybe you're still trying to understand how someone who said "I love you" was capable of turning their back on you in your most vulnerable moment. It doesn't matter if it was a friend, a spouse, a relative, a brother or sister in faith. What matters is that you trusted, and trust hurts when it breaks, because disappointment only comes from those we let get close. It's easy to deal with an enemy. What's difficult is dealing with someone who said they loved you, with someone who said, "I'm here for everything," and disappeared on your worst day. And what hurts the most isn't the absence, it's the silence. It's the lack of explanation. It's the fact that the person simply went on with their life as if you never existed. And there you stand, trying to understand, trying to figure out where you went wrong. If it was you who asked for too much, if it was you who wore others out, if you were the problem from the beginning. But let me tell you something. Even Jesus was abandoned, and not by strangers, by friends, people who walked with him, people who ate with him, who saw miracles, who said, "I will never abandon you." But in the darkest hour of the night, when he needed companionship the most, they were sleeping, and later they ran away. At the moment of his arrest, no one held his hand. In his hour of anguish, no one rushed to his side. At the height of his pain, he was alone. Think about the Garden of Gethsemane, the darkest night of Jesus' soul. "My soul is deeply grieved to the point of death," he said, and he asked only one thing of his closest friends: "Stay here and keep watch with me." A simple request, a basic human need. He didn't ask them to solve his problem. He didn't ask them to confront the soldiers. He only asked for presence, companionship in pain. And yet, they fell asleep. Not once, but 3 times. While he was sweating drops of blood, while his soul was being torn apart, they slept. And when the soldiers came, everyone fled. Peter, who hours before had sworn to die with him, denied knowing him 3 times. The abandonment was complete. So complete that on the cross Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He knew the pain that you're feeling now. He knows what it's like to have broken promises. He understands what it means to be left by those who should have stayed. And this too is part of the human experience. Being left, betrayed, ignored. And not because you deserve it, but because not everyone has the maturity to stay when the burden increases. Not everyone knows how to remain when the light dims. Some people are only with you while you're doing well, while you're smiling, functioning, producing, delivering. But the day you break, they disappear. In the moment when you need support the most, you discover who was really there for you and who was just enjoying your light. It's as if there are 2 types of people in life: those who love your essence and those who love your utility. The first stay when everything falls apart. The second only appear when you have something to offer. And this discovery, as painful as it may be, is also one of the greatest blessings we can receive, because it clears the path, it cleans the landscape, it reveals the truth behind the masks. And the truth, however much it hurts, always sets free. This abandonment says nothing about your worth. It says everything about others' capacity, because you may have been left, but that doesn't make you disposable. It doesn't make you less. It doesn't make you less worthy of love or care. Abandonment doesn't define who you are. It only exposes who the other person is. And if even Jesus was left, betrayed, forgotten, who are we to think that being alone is a sign of failure? Have you ever thought that perhaps abandonment is a sieve, a filter that separates those who are worthwhile from those who never were? That perhaps it's God protecting you from those who didn't deserve your heart? Because there are people who don't know how to honor who you are. There are people who aren't prepared for the depth that you carry. There are people who want you in half, but don't accept you completely. And you deserve more than crumbs of affection. You deserve more than empty promises. You deserve someone who stays not only on sunny days, but especially during storms. Jesus taught this not with words, but with his example. When everyone left him, he didn't leave anyone. When everyone fled, he stayed. When no one could bear the weight, he carried it all alone. The truth is that there are pains you will face by yourself, pains that no one will understand, paths that no one will walk with you, places so dark that only God will know you passed through there. But in these moments, it's exactly there that you discover who is really with you. Some solitude is not punishment, it's clarity, for you to see who is really valuable, for you to realize that you don't need crowds to be strong. Sometimes all you need is the truth, even if it hurts. And the truth is that you've been stronger than you imagine. You've faced days that no one saw. You've won battles that no one recognized. You've held back tears with your teeth, and even so, you continued. There is a strength inside you that only appears when everyone leaves, a resilience that only reveals itself when there's no one to lean on, a courage that is only born when you have to face things alone. It's in this moment that you discover that God placed within you resources that you didn't even know you had. It's when you understand that, even broken, you are capable of moving forward. Jesus, in his loneliest moment, taught us 3 great lessons. The first is that the pain of abandonment is not the end of the story. After the cross came the resurrection. After Good Friday came Easter Sunday. After everyone has left me came, I am with you always. The second is that abandonment reveals who truly loves. While everyone was fleeing, Mary remained at the foot of the cross. John didn't leave his side. And later, when everything seemed lost, it was the women who first arrived at the tomb. There is always someone who stays. There is always someone who truly loves. It might be just one person. It might be only God himself. But you are never completely alone. The third is that abandonment has a transformative power. It was after being left that Jesus completed his mission. It was in the deepest solitude that he achieved the greatest victory. And perhaps that's exactly what's happening with you now. Perhaps this abandonment isn't the end, but the beginning of something much greater than you imagine. I want you to think for a moment. What if this abandonment is actually a new beginning? What if this solitude is the space you needed to reconnect with who you really are? Sometimes we need to lose certain people to find ourselves again. Sometimes the silence of others is the only way to hear our own voice. Sometimes the emptiness that remains is exactly the space that God needs to enter. Jesus taught us that abandonment can be a portal, a painful passage, yes, but a passage to something greater, because it was precisely when everyone left him that he fulfilled his deepest purpose. It was in the moment of greatest solitude that he achieved his greatest victory. And perhaps this is the invitation for you today. Don't see abandonment as the end of the road. See it as a bend in the path, a bend that can take you to places you would never reach if you hadn't been left. When people leave, they take pieces of us. It's natural to feel the emptiness. It's natural to want to give up. It's natural to question if you'll ever feel complete again. But here's the truth that Jesus taught us. You can be broken and still be whole. You can be wounded and still be strong. You can be left and still not be alone. Because there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. Being alone is a circumstance. Being lonely is a state of mind. And even in moments of greatest solitude, when Jesus cried, "Why have you forsaken me?" he never stopped trusting. He never stopped loving. He never stopped fulfilling his purpose. And that's what he invites you to do today. Continue, even when everyone has gone. Trust, even when promises have been broken. Love, even when love hasn't been returned. Because in the end, it's not who stays with us that defines our journey. It's how we choose to walk even when we walk alone. So if today you feel that you're alone, if everyone seems to have turned their backs, remember this: you're still here. And that is already a victory. It's not the end of your story. It's just the end of a chapter. And just as Jesus transformed his greatest solitude into our greatest hope, you too can transform your abandonment into something powerful and meaningful. Because sometimes everyone needs to leave for you to discover the strength that exists within you. Sometimes you need to be left to understand that you were never really alone. Jesus promised, "I will be with you always, to the end of the age." And that's a promise that has never been broken. That's a presence that never leaves. That's a love that never gives up. So if today the wounds of abandonment still hurt, if the silence of others still echoes in your thoughts, if you're still trying to understand why you were left behind, know that there is someone who understands exactly what you feel. Someone who walked through the same valley. Someone who knew the same darkness. Someone who was also abandoned, but who transformed his abandonment into redemption, his solitude into salvation, his pain into purpose. And he can do the same for you. Because you weren't made to be left. You were made to be found. And maybe, just maybe, this abandonment is just the beginning of the greatest discovery of your life. The discovery of who you really are when there's no one else around you. The discovery that you are stronger than you imagine, more resilient than you believe, more loved than you can perceive. So take a deep breath, dry your tears, lift your head, and remember, Jesus too was left. Jesus too was abandoned. Jesus too was alone. But the story didn't end there, and yours won't end here either. Because after the cross, resurrection always comes. After the darkest night, dawn always comes. After abandonment, encounter always comes. The encounter with your true strength, the encounter with your true purpose, the encounter with the love that never leaves you, the encounter with who you really are. And that, my friend, that is invincible. There's something no one tells you about pain. It changes you. Pain transforms you. It distances you from some people. It brings you closer to others. It hardens you in some places and softens you in others. After experiencing pain, you never return to being the same person. And there are days when what's most upsetting isn't just what they did to you, it's what pain is making you become. Have you felt this? Have you noticed you're becoming more withdrawn, more silent, colder? That you've stopped believing in people? That your heart, once so available, now holds back? Not because you want to, but because you've grown tired of being hurt. It's almost a defense mechanism. You begin to protect yourself even from what is good. You start to mistrust those who approach with affection. You begin to close yourself off in layers, one by one, until you become someone who smiles, but doesn't give yourself away, because loving hurts. And after you've been wounded by love, you become afraid to love again. But here's something perhaps no one has had the courage to tell you. Love only truly hurts when it's genuine. If it hurt, it's because it was real. If it marked you, it's because you were fully present. If you suffered for someone, it's because you truly loved. And this, as painful as it may be, isn't weakness. It's courage. It's easy to live halfway. It's easy not to care. It's easy to build walls and avoid any risk. Anyone can protect themselves. Anyone knows how not to get hurt. Just don't give yourself to anything or anyone. The difficult thing is to love knowing it might hurt. The difficult thing is to give without guarantees of receiving. The difficult thing is to extend your hand knowing it might come back empty. And this is the paradox few understand. Those who suffer most for love are also those who have most deeply experienced what love means. The depth of pain often reveals the depth of one's capacity to love. Think about the greatest pain you've ever felt. It wasn't caused by strangers, was it? It was caused by people you let in, people you loved, people you trusted. But pain wants to steal this from you. It wants to convince you that loving is foolishness, that caring is a waste of time, that those who love too much suffer too much, and therefore it's better to harden yourself. But do you know what Jesus did when he was at the height of pain? He loved, even while being betrayed, even while being wounded, even while being rejected, even while being insulted. While the world spat on him, he chose to forgive. While the cross crushed him, he chose to look with compassion. While they nailed his hands with cruelty, he said, "They know not what they do." This isn't weakness. This is strength, of the rarest kind. Think for a moment about what Jesus was feeling in that instant. The physical pain was only part of the suffering. What he felt most was the pain of rejection, the pain of being misunderstood, the pain of seeing those he loved turning their backs. And still, when human logic would expect hatred, Jesus responded with love. When it would be natural to hold grudges, Jesus offered forgiveness. It wasn't naivety. It wasn't passivity. It was a conscious, deliberate, and revolutionary choice. It was a decision not to allow pain to have the final word, not to let suffering dictate who he was. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson he left us. Pain can change your life, but it doesn't need to change your essence. Loving through pain is an act of revolution. It's a miracle happening inside someone who is broken. It's the refusal to let evil transform you into what you never were. Because the world expects you to react with hatred. It expects you to return in kind. It expects you to be silent, to close yourself off, to withdraw. But when you choose to continue loving, you break the logic of pain. You interrupt a cycle that could last for generations. You transform poison into medicine. It's like that story of the Buddhist monk. If someone offers you a gift and you don't accept it, to whom does the gift belong? To the giver, of course. In the same way, when someone offers you hatred, hurt, disappointment, you're not obligated to accept it. You can look at it and say, "This doesn't belong to me, I won't carry this with me." There is a profound freedom in this choice. A freedom that doesn't depend on the actions of others. A freedom that comes from within. And this is what Jesus demonstrated on the cross. That even when everything is taken from you, your dignity, your comfort, your life, there still remains one thing that no one can steal: your ability to choose how you will respond. Loving isn't about denying what they did to you. It's deciding that you won't transform into the one who hurt you. And that is liberating, because there are people who hurt you and went on with their lives. But if you hold on to it, dwell on it, live around it, you'll continue bleeding inside every day over something the other person hardly remembers doing. It's like drinking poison expecting the other person to die. It's like imprisoning yourself in a cell whose key exists only inside you. Resentment is a weight that deforms your shoulders. Hurt is an anchor that prevents you from sailing. Bitterness is a fire that burns only the house where it lives, your own. Jesus understood this like no one else. That's why even on the cross he didn't hold grudges. He didn't nurture hatred. He didn't let pain transform him into something he wasn't. Instead, he kept his essence intact. He remained faithful to his nature of love. And the invitation he extends to you today is the same. Don't let pain rob you of who you are. Forgiving isn't saying it was fair. It's just stopping punishing yourself for a mistake that wasn't yours. And loving, even if with fear, even if with caution, is proving that pain touched you, yes, but it didn't kill you inside. Forgiveness isn't a favor you do for others. It's a gift you give yourself. It's the decision not to let the past continue dictating your present and your future. It's like that parable Jesus told about the servant who was forgiven an enormous debt, but couldn't forgive a small debt. He ended up a prisoner of his own inability to let go. And so are we when we cling to pain. When we revisit the wounds every day, when we make hurt our identity, we remain trapped in a prison we built ourselves. We live chained to a past we cannot change. We become slaves to those who hurt us, because we let them continue defining who we are. But there is another way, the way Jesus showed. He didn't deny the pain. He felt it, completely. He didn't pretend he wasn't suffering. He cried. He sweat blood. He didn't romanticize the suffering. He asked for the cup to pass. But at the same time, he didn't allow pain to define him. He didn't let suffering alter his nature. He didn't abandon love, even when love seemed to have too high a price. If today your heart is in ruins, if you feel you've become someone too hardened, start slowly. Look at yourself with more gentleness. Embrace those who haven't disappointed you. Be grateful for small gestures, and little by little, rebuild the bridge between pain and love. Reconstruction doesn't happen overnight. It's not an event, it's a process. It's not a leap, it's a journey. Sometimes slow, sometimes hesitant, but always moving toward life. It's like rebuilding a house after an earthquake. First, you need to assess the damage, then remove the debris. Next, strengthen what remains standing, and only then begin to rebuild, brick by brick, day by day. And in the process, you'll discover that the new house won't be identical to the previous one. It will have scars, yes. It will bear marks of what happened, but it will also have deeper foundations, stronger walls, larger windows to let in more light, because that's the beauty of reconstruction. You don't go back to being who you were. You become someone deeper, wiser, more authentic, someone who has known pain but chosen love, someone who fell but learned to rise again, someone who knows the value of scars because each one tells a story of overcoming. You don't need to love everyone, but don't allow what they did to you to prevent you from continuing to be who you are, because deep down, you know, you are love. It was just hidden behind the scars, and these scars aren't your shame. They're your medals. They're proof that you felt, lived, risked. They're testimony that you had the courage to love, even knowing it might hurt. Jesus carried his scars with pride. After rising, he didn't hide them. He showed them as proof of his love, as testimony of his surrender, as evidence that pain didn't have the last word. And that's what he invites you to do today, to show your scars not as signs of defeat, but as marks of a love that was greater than fear, of a courage that was greater than pain, of a hope that was greater than disappointment. Because in the end, it's not how much you suffered that matters. It's how much you loved despite the suffering. It's not how many times you fell that defines your story. It's how many times you chose to get up and continue loving. And if today you feel incapable of loving again, if pain seems to have frozen your heart, remember that the same Jesus who loved on the cross is now by your side whispering, "I know how it hurts. I felt it too. But I promise you, love is always worth it, and I will be with you every step of the way." Because even if everyone disappoints you, even if everyone abandons you, even if everyone hurts you, there is one who will never give up on you, one who knows your pain from the inside, one who knows your name even when you have forgotten who you are. And in the presence of that love, your scars begin to tell a different story, no longer a story of loss and pain, but a story of rescue and redemption, a story where love has the last word, And this, my friend, this is what makes you truly human. What connects you to the divine? What allows you, even after the most devastating storm, to look to the sky and see that stars still exist? Because choosing to love even in pain isn't just following Jesus' example. It's discovering that in the end, you are more like him than you imagined. You may not see it now, but there's something in you that remains standing, even after everything, even after being abandoned, even after being broken, even after begging for answers and receiving silence. And do you know what's most beautiful about this? You're still here watching, searching, trying, even without strength, even without certainties, even without faith in the magnitude you once had. But you continue, and that alone says a lot about who you are. Have you ever stopped to think about how many times you could have given up but didn't? How many nights when exhaustion was greater than everything else, but you saw the dawn? How many tears fell onto your pillow without anyone knowing, and yet you got up and made the day happen? This isn't insignificant. It isn't weakness. It isn't unimportant. It's resistance. It's life pulsing, even when wounded. And even when you saw no value in yourself, even when you felt small, dirty, lost, Jesus didn't give up on you. This isn't just a catchy phrase. It's pure truth, real, engraved in history. He saw everything, everything you did, everything you thought, everything you wanted to hide from others and even from yourself. And still, he stayed. He didn't distance himself from your mistakes, didn't turn his back on you because of your mess, didn't love you less because you fell. On the contrary, it was precisely because he knew everything about you that he decided to love you even more. And that changes everything. Because in the world, love is conditional. People love you while you serve them, while you're useful, while you please them. But Jesus, he loves you in the mud, in your fall, in crisis, in the confusion that no one sees. You may have lost yourself, but he never lost sight of you. You may have thought you went too far, that you distanced yourself too much, that you became someone he no longer recognizes. But he looks at you now, exactly as you are, and says, I still see value. Because Jesus' love isn't based on your performance, doesn't depend on what you do right or wrong, doesn't increase when you succeed, doesn't diminish when you stumble. He doesn't give up. Not when you say you no longer feel anything, not when you close yourself off, not when you give up praying, not when you remain silent during worship, not when you distance yourself from everything, not when you give up on yourself. He remains there, waiting, seeing you, caring for you behind the scenes. When Jesus faced the cross, he could have given up, could have said, Father, this is too much for me, could have summoned legions of angels to save him from that pain. But he didn't give up. He looked beyond the cross, saw you on the other side, and decided that you were worth the price. In Gethsemane, his sweat became like drops of blood. The anguish was real. The fear was palpable, the weight of the entire world on his shoulders. And still he said, Not my will, but yours be done. Can you imagine what went through Jesus' mind at that moment? He knew about every lash that would come, every nail, every insult, every painful breath on the cross. And even so, he continued. Why? Because he saw your face among the multitude of history, heard your name among the billions, knew your story before it even began, and decided that you were worth every drop of blood. This is what it means to not give up, to continue even when every fiber of your being screams to stop, to take one more step when your feet can no longer bear it, to breathe deeply when the air seems to have run out in your lungs. Perhaps you're crossing a desert now, where the days seem the same, the horizon doesn't change, the heat suffocates, thirst increases, and there are no signs of water nearby. Jesus knows this place well. He spent 40 days in the desert, without food, without comfort, tempted at every moment. And do you know what he did? He transformed the desert into a classroom, transformed hunger into strength, transformed loneliness into intimacy with the Father, transformed each temptation into victory. The desert isn't the end of your story, it's just a chapter, a training ground, a preparation. The greatest ministries in the Bible were forged in the desert. Moses spent 40 years there before liberating a nation. David faced wild beasts before facing giants. Paul spent years in Arabia before changing the world. Your desert isn't punishment, it's preparation. And if Jesus didn't give up in the desert, he won't give up on you and yours. Perhaps the hardest thing isn't the pain, but the silence. Those moments when you pray and it seems your words hit the ceiling and bounce back. Those nights when you beg for a sign, for a word, for a whisper, and nothing comes. Jesus knows this place too. On the cross he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The Son of God, experiencing the Father's silence, darkness covering the earth, the veil tearing, the whole world seeming to collapse. And yet it was exactly in this moment of apparent abandonment that the greatest work in history was being completed. God's silence isn't absence, it's work behind the scenes. When you don't hear his voice, it's because he's moving mountains that you can't yet see, preparing paths that you don't yet know, aligning people you haven't yet met. The silence isn't rejection, it's trust. It's God saying, "Trust me beyond what you can see or feel." Paul, one of the greatest apostles in history, had a thorn in his flesh, something that tormented him, something that limited him, something that made him feel weak. 3 times he begged for it to be removed. 3 times he heard, "My grace is sufficient for you." And it was there in his greatest weakness that he discovered the greatest truth. When I am weak, then I am strong, because Jesus' strength is made perfect in weakness. You don't need to pretend you're okay when you're not. You don't need to hide your wounds. You don't need to mask your pain. Jesus doesn't need your perfection. He works better with your honesty. It's in confessed weakness that divine strength finds space. It's in acknowledged emptiness that fulfillment happens. It's in poverty of spirit that the kingdom of heaven manifests. Perhaps you feel too weak to continue. Perhaps your resources have run out. Perhaps your strength has been exhausted. And that's exactly where the miracle begins. When you reach the end of yourself, you finally reach the beginning of God. Peter denied Jesus 3 times, at the most critical hour, at the most important moment, when his master most needed loyalty. And after the rooster crowed, he wept bitterly, felt the weight of betrayal, the bitter taste of cowardice, the shame that corrodes the soul. He must have thought, "It's over for me. I was the disciple who promised never to abandon him. I was the one who said I would die for him. And at the first sign of pressure, I denied even knowing him." But do you know what Jesus did after rising? He sent a specific message. "Go tell the disciples and Peter that I will meet them in Galilee." Jesus made a point of mentioning Peter by name, of showing that he wasn't forgotten, of proving that failure wasn't the end. And by the seashore, Jesus didn't ask Peter, "Why did you deny me?" Instead, he asked, "Do you love me?" 3 questions of love to heal 3 denials, 3 opportunities for a new beginning to erase 3 moments of weakness. And there, among fish and embers, the broken disciple was restored, the failed apostle was recommissioned, the defeated man found a new mission, because Jesus isn't interested in your past failures, he's interested in your future purpose. You don't need to be perfect to be loved, you just need to be true. And if today all you have to offer is what remains of a tired heart, he receives it with affection, with mercy, with the eyes of someone who never stopped believing in you. Perhaps you think, "But I don't deserve it." And it's true, no one deserves it, but still, he gives. Because Jesus' love isn't a prize, it's a gift. It isn't a reward, it's grace. It isn't achievement, it's presence. It isn't an end, it's rebirth where everyone else said it was the end. You may have failed, may have run away, may have hurt people, may have repented too late, but none of this changes the most powerful fact in the universe. Jesus hasn't given up on you, and just because of that, you still have a chance, still have a path, still have purpose. Isaiah wrote, "Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." Eagles face storms differently. While other birds flee, they open their wings and use the air currents to climb higher. They transform adversity into altitude, problems into platforms, resistance into momentum. And that's what Jesus wants to teach you. The art of using the storm to rise higher, the wisdom of finding purpose in pain, the ability to transform wounds into cracks through which light enters. When you no longer have the strength to run, he teaches you to walk. When walking seems impossible, he carries you himself. Because exhaustion is never the end of the story for those who trust in Jesus. It's just the moment to exchange strength, to let yours run out so that his can begin. Human strength has limits, divine strength knows no boundaries. Perhaps others have given up on you. The boss who didn't see your potential, the spouse who couldn't stay, the friends who disappeared during the crisis, the family who didn't understand your struggle. And each abandonment left a mark. Each rejection planted a doubt. Each desertion made you question, "Am I worth it?" Jesus knows this feeling. On the cross, everyone abandoned him. His disciples fled. The crowds that acclaimed him now shouted, "Crucify him." Even the Father seemed to be silent for a moment. He experienced the deepest abandonment so that you would never have to be alone. And if the whole world gives up on you, still Jesus remains constant, unshakable, faithful to the end, because his love isn't based on your performance, but on his promise, not on your perfection, but on his faithfulness. What is in pieces can be rebuilt. What is silent can speak again. What is dark can receive light. What you considered dead can breathe again. Because as long as you still have breath, there is a God looking at you and saying, I still believe in who you can become. And if Jesus, who knows every corner of your heart, every secret of your mind, every wound of your soul, still hasn't given up on you, who are you to give up on yourself? The journey doesn't end with your falls, nor with your pains, nor with your failures. The journey only ends when you decide it's over. And today Jesus is inviting you to rise once more, to believe once more, to try once more, to live once more. Not with your strength, which has been depleted, but with his, which never ends. Not with your courage, which has faltered, but with his, which faced even the cross. Not with your faith, which has weakened, but with his, which moves mountains. Don't give up. Not now. Not after having come so far. Not after having overcome so much. Jesus didn't give up on you on the cross. He won't give up on you now. And if the creator of the universe, he who knows each star by name, he who sustains everything with his powerful word, he who conquered death and hell, still believes in you, you can be certain. Your story isn't over yet. The best is yet to come, and the God who began the good work in you is faithful to complete it until the day of Christ Jesus. Stay firm. Keep moving forward, one step at a time, one day at a time, one prayer at a time. Jesus hasn't given up on you, and that changes everything. Have you ever spent so much time at rock bottom that you started to believe rock bottom was where you belonged? Have you become so accustomed to pain that it became a normal part of your day? Have you looked in the mirror and thought, I don't know who I am anymore? There are phases like this. Phases where we stop trying, not because we want to give up, but because we've lost even the memory of what it was like to live in peace. You wake up on autopilot, do what you have to do, say what you have to say, respond, everything's fine, with a rehearsed smile. But the truth is that, inside, you're in survival mode, one step at a time, without direction. And from spending so much time in this dark place, you begin to believe that the way out isn't for you anymore, that perhaps the world moves forward for everyone except you. People say, it will pass, everything has a purpose, God has something great for you. And you smile out of politeness, but deep down you only think, really? Is that really true? Because sometimes pain doesn't scream. It stays there, silent, on the inside, slowly eating away at your energy. You don't explode, you implode. And the saddest part is that you learn to live with this hole in your chest, learn to function while broken, to live with your soul in pieces, to move forward without truly moving forward. But today, I want you to stop. Stop everything for a few seconds and listen. You are still here, and that is already a new beginning. No, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it will be quick. I'm not saying the pain will disappear after this sentence. But I am saying something that perhaps you've never heard with this weight. There's still time. There's time to take a deep breath and decide to try. There's time to stop hurting yourself with what has already passed. There's time to change what can still be changed. There's time to rediscover yourself. Maybe you've spent too much time trying to fix what broke, or trying to understand why things happened, trying to explain things to others, to God, to yourself. But what if the answer never comes? What if the reason is never clear? What if, in the end, what matters most isn't understanding but choosing to continue? Because continuing isn't ignoring what happened. It's not letting what happened define the rest of your life. Think about how Jesus dealt with those who needed a fresh start. He didn't wait for people to become perfect before approaching them. He approached them first, and it was that encounter that transformed everything. Remember the Samaritan woman? 5 husbands, living with a man who wasn't even her husband. She went to the well at the hottest time of day when no one would be there, to avoid judgmental looks. And it was exactly there in the place of her shame that Jesus found her. He didn't start by pointing out her mistakes, but by offering living water. He didn't start by demanding change, but by offering relationship. And her? She left so transformed that she even forgot her water jar, running to the city to tell about this man who told me everything I ever did and still treated her with dignity. That conversation wasn't just a dialogue, it was a complete new beginning. Or think about Zacchaeus, the tax collector, hated by everyone. Small in stature but giant in corruption, he climbed a tree just to see Jesus pass by. perhaps curious, perhaps feeling that emptiness that stolen money never managed to fill. And what did Jesus do? He stopped, looked up, called him by name. "Zacchaeus, come down quickly, for today I must stay at your house." Imagine the impact of those words. In the midst of a crowd that despised him, Jesus saw him. Among so many anonymous faces, Jesus knew his name. While everyone wanted distance, Jesus wanted closeness. And even before Zacchaeus promised to return what he had stolen, Jesus had already decided to be with him. This is Jesus' pattern. The new beginning comes before perfection, not after it. You may have made mistakes, you may have fallen, you may have hurt yourself badly, you may have broken everything around you, but still you are here. And being here is a sign that the story isn't over yet. There are people who are already gone. There are plans that will no longer be fulfilled. There are relationships that won't return. There are words that can't be taken back. There are scars that will remain. But that doesn't prevent a new story from beginning to be written. And do you know what's stronger than a new beginning? It's the person who decides to begin again, even without knowing if it will work out. It's you looking at the ground full of shards and saying, "It's okay, I'll try with what's left." Perhaps you can't go back to who you were. Perhaps you shouldn't, because who you were before the pain didn't know what you know now, didn't have the marks you have today. And some scars, although unwanted, are also medals. They show that you went through something that could have destroyed you, but didn't. Did you know that Jesus, even resurrected and glorified, kept the scars on his hands, feet, and side? The Son of God, perfect and powerful, chose to keep the marks of his pain. Why? Because scars tell stories. Scars are proof. Scars are reminders that pain has an end, but love remains. When Thomas doubted, Jesus didn't show his majesty or power. He showed his scars. "See my hands? Put your finger here." The marks that seemed shameful were now the greatest testimony of victory. You may not have won yet, but you are standing. Perhaps staggering, but standing. And that's what matters most now. You don't need to run off. You don't need to put on a big smile tomorrow. You don't need to go back to being how you were before. You just need to start. Start taking care of yourself. Start treating yourself with more kindness. Start forgiving. Start breathing again more calmly. Start asking sincere questions. Start talking to God not as someone who demands, but as someone who simply wants to be heard. Jesus never demanded perfection from those who came to him, but he always welcomed those who came with truth. He never turned his back on those who were broken, but yes, on those who pretended to be whole. So if today you are broken, this is your chance, because true beginnings only happen when you allow yourself to be real, without a mask, without a script, without the obligation to be okay. We were taught that we need to be ready to begin again, but it's not true. Nobody is ready. We begin again with fear, with doubts, with weakness, with anger sometimes, but we begin again because the soul asks for it, because the heart is tired of pretending, because there's something inside you that still believes, even if very quietly, that it's not over. Remember that parable of the prodigal son? He returned home not because he was ready, but because he was hungry. Not because he had become someone better, but because he had hit rock bottom. He didn't return with a redemption plan. He returned with a rehearsed speech. "Father, I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants." But the father didn't even let him finish. Before he could offer himself as a servant, he was already being embraced as a son. Before he could prove that he deserved a second chance, he was already receiving a ring, sandals, and a feast. Because true new beginnings don't depend on our perfection. They depend only on our decision to return home, no matter how dirty and broken we are. You may be at the end of the line, but for God, that's just the beginning of reconstruction. When Jerusalem was in ruins, with its walls broken and its gates burned, it seemed like the end. But it was exactly there, in the rubble, that Nehemiah saw the beginning of something new. The reconstruction didn't begin when everything was perfect. It began when someone looked at the ruins and said, "Let us rebuild." The reconstruction didn't wait for ideal conditions. It began with what was available. The reconstruction didn't demand certainty of the result. It demanded only the courage of the first brick. And maybe that's what you need today. Not answers to all your questions. Not guarantees that everything will work out. Not promises that it will never hurt again. Maybe you just need the courage to place the first brick, to take the first step, to say the first sincere prayer, to shed the first honest tear, to open the first door to let the light in. Breathe. Slowly. No rush. No wait. Life still has much to show you, and what you've lived through until now, no matter how difficult it has been, wasn't for nothing. Every tear, every silence, every loss, every night awake. All of this has shaped you to be who you are becoming now, and who you are becoming can still live an entire life ahead. Paul wrote, "Forgetting the things that are behind and reaching forward to those things which are ahead, I press toward the goal." He didn't say he forgot everything he had lived through, but that he didn't allow the past to determine his future. He didn't allow his mistakes to define his identity. He didn't allow his falls to dictate his direction. Your story doesn't need a happy ending to have value. Even incomplete, even with painful chapters, even with parts you'd prefer to erase, your story matters. Your journey counts. Your process has meaning. In Japan, there's an art called kintsugi. When a valuable ceramic breaks, instead of throwing it away or trying to hide the cracks, artisans fill these fissures with gold. The result is an even more valuable and unique piece, where the scars become the most beautiful part. That's how God sees you. Not as someone broken who needs to hide their cracks, but as someone whose wounds can become channels of light. Not as someone ruined by their mistakes, but as someone whose failures can be filled with grace. And that's why there's still time. Because as long as there's breath, there's space for God's gold to fill what broke in you. You don't need to take giant steps today. You don't need to fix everything that's broken. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to say yes to beginning again. You just need to open a crack for hope to enter. You just need to allow yourself to believe, even if timidly, that your story is still being written. Jesus loves unfinished works. He specializes in stories that don't yet have an ending. He delights in taking what seems irretrievable and transforming it into something new. Perhaps you can't see beyond the next curve. Perhaps you only have strength for the next step, but it's enough. Because beginning again isn't doing everything at once, it's doing one thing at a time. It isn't solving all problems, it's facing one at a time. It isn't feeling totally restored, it's allowing yourself to be healed one day at a time. And while you do your part, small, imperfect, hesitant, Jesus does his, complete, perfect, secure. You place your broken trust. He places his unshakable faithfulness. You bring your sincere doubts. He brings his certain promises. You offer the little that's left. He multiplies it as he did with the loaves and fishes, because there's still time. There's still time to begin again. There's still time to believe. There's still time to live what you can't even imagine now. And that's the good news that changes everything. With Jesus, there's always time to begin again. After you decide to start over, fear comes. Fear of not succeeding. Fear of falling again. Fear of trying and failing. Fear of returning to the same dark place you're trying to escape from now. It's normal to feel this weight. It's human. Because when we spend too much time fallen, we get used to doubting our own ability to rise. Pain becomes identity. Failure becomes expectation. You may take the first step, but with a heart full of mistrust. What if everything crumbles again? What if I'm not strong enough this time either? What if I disappoint everyone once more? These questions aren't just passing thoughts. They're heavy anchors trying to keep you tied to the same place. They haunt many people, and perhaps they're haunting you now. You want to escape the pain with all your strength. You want to leave the past behind like closing a locked door. You want to live a new phase, breathe different air. But you still carry within yourself the feeling that you'll be abandoned once again, that no one will be there when you stumble, that in the end, when the lights go out and silence returns, you'll end up alone again, exactly as before. And that's where the deepest deception lies. The deception the enemy whispers in your ear during the early hours. The deception that seems so real we mistake it for truth, because you are not alone anymore. And you won't need to go through this process alone. You never were, actually. Even if nobody sees, nobody understands, nobody follows. Even when friends distance themselves because they don't understand your struggle. Even when family doesn't know how to help you. Even when it seems the entire world has moved forward, and only you remain standing still. God is here, now, present, with you. Not because you called him with beautiful words, not because you made a perfect prayer, not because you earned the right to his presence, but because he never left. You might have distanced yourself. You might have gone silent for months, years perhaps. You might have rebelled when the pain was unbearable. You might have shouted at him, ignored him, lost yourself on paths you swore you would never follow. But he stayed, remained, waited. While you cried in hiding with your face buried in the pillow so no one would hear, he was sitting on the floor with you, counting each tear. While you blamed yourself for not being able to move forward, for trying and repeatedly failing, He looked at you with compassion, not judgment, like a father who understands his child's timing. While you thought nobody cared anymore, that your story had ended there, he sustained you from within, even in silence, weaving new paths that you couldn't yet see. There are things only his presence can explain, like that inexplicable breath that emerged when you thought you couldn't breathe anymore, like that strange peace that came even when everything around was crumbling, like that strength that appeared from nowhere, precisely when you had already decided to give up. Only his presence can heal wounds that no medicine can reach. Only his presence can hold you when everything in you wants to collapse. Only his presence can rebuild what seemed permanently lost. And it doesn't matter what others think. It doesn't matter if nobody believes in your change. It doesn't matter if they say you'll fall again, that people like you don't change, that it's just a matter of time. They don't know what God is doing inside. They don't have access to the silent work happening in the depths of your soul. They don't feel what you feel at this exact moment when something new begins to be born within you, because God works in the invisible, in the silence of ordinary moments, in the subtlety of small signs, in the reading between the lines of seemingly normal days. While the world demands that you be well, recovered, productive, and smiling, God invites you to simply be with him, without performance, without hurry, without burden, without needing to pretend the wound has healed when it's still open. He knows exactly how difficult it is for you right now. He knows your limitations better than you do yourself. He understands your tiredness when even you can't explain why you're so exhausted. And he doesn't expect more from you than your sincere heart right now. You don't need to come ready. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to know the entire path. You need to come real, as you are, with doubts, fears, scars, and everything else. And in this new beginning that's being born inside you, this timid, hesitant beginning still covered with doubts, the only certainty you need to have is you won't walk alone. Jesus is not just the one who gives you a second chance. He is the one who walks with you in every step of that chance. He doesn't just point out the way, he becomes the way. He doesn't just illuminate the road, he himself is the light that dispels the darkness around. Because the God who saw you at the bottom of the pit, who heard your cries when no one else was around, who felt your tears when you thought there was no more hope, is the same one who will walk with you step by step on the way up, and he is not in a hurry. He doesn't operate in the accelerated time of this world. He has no anxiety. He doesn't keep checking the clock waiting for immediate results. He won't rush you when you stop because you've run out of breath, nor abandon you if you slip and fall a few times along the way. He is Father, and not just any Father, distant, too busy to notice. He is the Father that Jesus revealed, present, attentive, compassionate, and real fathers don't give up on tired children. They don't abandon wounded children. They don't give up when the process is slow. So let him accompany you. Allow him to hold your hand in this crossing. Accept the rhythm he proposes, not the frantic rhythm of the world, but the rhythm of grace. You don't need to force anything. You don't need to understand everything now. You don't need to have answers for all the questions. Just walk with him, one step at a time. And something extraordinary begins to happen when you accept not walking alone. Gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, what was weight becomes purpose. What was crying becomes comfort that you can offer to others. What was anguish becomes peace that even you can't explain. What was despair becomes hope, not just for you, but for everyone around you. And you begin to realize that starting over is not a ladder you climb alone, breathless and exhausted. It's a journey you make accompanied by the creator of the universe himself. It's a process where each step is sustained by the one who knows the end from the beginning. You begin to understand that your falls don't define your destiny, that your mistakes aren't greater than grace, that your past doesn't have the final word over your future. The world might say you don't deserve more chances. It might label you, limit you, reduce you to your failures. It might try to convince you that some people simply weren't made to win. But God looks at you and says, I never stopped walking by your side. Even when you couldn't see me, even when you doubted, even when it seemed I had abandoned you. I was there, sustaining what you couldn't see, preparing what you couldn't yet imagine. And if you allow, if you make space amid the doubts and fears, he will show you that there is a new path, even after everything. A path that doesn't erase the scars, but gives them new meaning. A path where your testimony of starting over will become light for others who are still lost in darkness. Because with Jesus, each ending is just the beginning of something greater. Each defeat contains the seeds of a victory that you can't yet see. Each tear is collected and transformed into something precious. And as you walk with Him, day after day, step after step, you discover that the journey was never about arriving perfect at the destination. It was always about allowing perfect love to accompany you on the imperfect path. And that changes everything. It changes how you face obstacles. It changes how you respond to stumbles. It changes how you rise after each fall. Because now you know, you are not alone in this journey. You never were, and you never will be. He who began a good work in you is faithful to complete it, not because you are strong enough, not because you will never make mistakes again, but because He is faithful even when we are unfaithful, because His love doesn't depend on our perfection, and it is precisely in our weaknesses, in our limitations, in the places where we admit we can't do it alone, that His strength manifests itself in all its fullness. So take a deep breath, take another step, even if trembling. Continue, even when the path seems too long. Persist, even when the voice of giving up seems louder than that of hope, because you are not alone. And that makes all the difference. That changes everything. That transforms the journey of starting over not into a burden too heavy, but into a path of healing, restoration, and discovery. A path where you don't just survive, you flourish. You don't just recover, you are reborn. You don't just continue existing. You find a greater purpose that transforms even your deepest pains into gifts to heal the world around you. And in the end, when you look back, you will see that each step of this path, even the most painful ones, traced not only the story of your restoration, but a living testimony of the God who never, ever abandons His children. This is the God who walks with you now. This is the Jesus who invites you not to give up. This is the Spirit who whispers when everything seems impossible, "You are not alone. I am here. Let's continue together." Look at yourself, right now, in this moment, just as you are, tired, perhaps crying, perhaps in silence, still, not knowing exactly why you're still here, but you are here, and that, in itself, should be news in heaven, because you could have not endured, you could have given up, you could have completely lost yourself, you could have surrendered to what hurt and simply left everything behind, but no, you stayed, even broken, even alone, even without understanding what God was doing. You stayed, and no one needs to applaud, because you know the weight it was, the effort that no one saw, the nights you didn't share with anyone, that muffled cry in the bathroom, that desire to disappear in the middle of a conversation, that forced smile to not worry others. You know, and God does too. The pain that silently accompanied you for so long, it was not ignored. It was witnessed, felt, heard, not with words, but with the presence of a God who never abandoned you, even when you thought He did. Remember that passage where Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." He wasn't just inviting people from 2,000 years ago. He was speaking to you, today, now, in this exact moment when your heart seems to weigh a ton. Jesus knows the weight of the cross. He knows what it's like to feel you can't take it anymore. He experienced abandonment, betrayal, loneliness, and suffering in its rawest form. When you cry in the dark, you're not crying alone. He is there, holding each tear, counting each sigh. And now, here, with this video open, with this weight on your back, with all this in your chest that perhaps you can't even explain, and you need to hear this, you are a miracle that continues to happen. A miracle isn't just when the body is healed. A miracle is when the soul doesn't give up breathing even when suffocated. When Jesus multiplied the loaves and fishes, people saw the obvious, food that appeared from nothing. But the true miracle was in the message behind it, that with almost nothing, God can do much. That when it seems it's over, it's actually just beginning. It's exactly like that with you. Maybe you look at your life and see only crumbs, remains of dreams, pieces of hope, fragments of faith. But in Jesus' hands, this is more than enough to start a new story. You might think there's nothing special left in you, but God doesn't think so. He still sees gold where you only see rubble. He still sees purpose where you only see tiredness. He still sees beauty where you only see scars. And if you're here, reading, listening, feeling, it's because something inside you still pulses. Maybe very softly, maybe trembling, but it pulses. It's like that mustard seed Jesus mentioned, the smallest of all seeds, but which becomes a tree where birds can make nests. Your faith may seem minimal now, so small that you can barely feel it. But even that faith the size of a mustard seed is enough to start a transformation. It's life calling back. It's hope stirring amid the rubble. It's your soul saying, "There's still time." When Peter denied Jesus 3 times, he must have felt that everything was over, that he had betrayed not only his master, but his purpose, his identity, his reason for existing. But Jesus didn't discard Peter. He restored him, and not only restored him, but made him a cornerstone of the church. From failure to purpose, from denial to affirmation, from cowardice to courage. And if Jesus could do this with Peter, imagine what he can do with you. You don't need to have big plans now. You don't need to change everything at once. You don't need to be strong today. You just need to believe it's not over. Jesus never demanded perfection from the people who followed him. He chose fishermen, tax collectors, people with complicated pasts and uncertain futures. He didn't wait for them to become perfect before calling them. He called them so that walking with him they would find a new way to live. That's how new beginnings work in God's kingdom. It's not about having everything resolved before taking the first step. It's about taking the first step even when it seems like you're going to fall. And how do I know this? Because you're still here. And that is not insignificant. You survived days that seemed final, thoughts that tried to erase you, words that hurt more than knives, absences that left holes where love once was. You continued, even when you no longer knew why. Remember the storm the disciples faced in the boat? They were experienced fishermen. They knew those waters well. But that night the waves were bigger, the wind was stronger, and the fear seemed uncontrollable. They cried out to Jesus, who was sleeping in the boat, "Master, don't you care if we perish?" And Jesus got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Quiet, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. How many storms have you faced? How many times have you felt that the boat of your life was going to sink? But somehow, you're still sailing. Maybe with a damaged hull, maybe with torn sails, but still above the waters. And now perhaps it's time to realize, the reason was always you. You deserve to rise again. You deserve to start from scratch if necessary. You deserve to find peace again. Even if it takes time, even if it's difficult, even if you don't know where to begin. Jesus told the parable of the lost sheep, that one that strayed from the flock. The shepherd left the 99 to go after the one that was lost, not because it was better than the others, but because, in the shepherd's eyes, it had the same value. It mattered as much as all the others combined. That's how God looks at you, not as a number in a statistic, not as just another face in the crowd, but as someone for whom he would leave everything to find. Because it's not about merit based on behavior, it's about identity. You are a child who makes mistakes, a child who falls, a child who rebels, a child who runs, but can always return. And God is not waiting for you to fix yourself to receive you. He stands with open arms outside your pain, outside that dark room where you've hidden, outside that fortress you built so no one would hurt you again. In the parable of the prodigal son, the father didn't wait for the son to reach the door of the house. He didn't wait for the son to bathe, change clothes, or rehearse a convincing speech of repentance. Seeing the son still far away, the father ran, something undignified for a man of his position in that culture. But love doesn't care about dignity. Love runs, embraces, restores. It's this kind of love that's waiting for you. A love that doesn't care about appearances, protocols, expectations. A love that just wants to embrace you again, just waiting for you to open the door, even if it's just a crack. Because all it takes is a crack, for light to enter, for life to return, for grace to reach. Jesus said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." The darkness may seem absolute in your closed room, in your tormented mind, in your broken heart, but it is in the nature of light to penetrate even through the smallest spaces. A single ray of light is more powerful than an ocean of darkness. And when that light, the presence of Jesus, begins to enter your life, it doesn't just illuminate the environment. It transforms everything it touches. The shadows lose strength. The dark corners are revealed. Fear loses space. And perhaps you don't notice immediately, but something begins to sprout where before there was only dry land. A small seed of hope. A tiny sign of new life. And if you've come this far, if you haven't skipped this video, if you've let these words enter you until now, then I need to tell you with complete certainty, you're not at the end. You're at the beginning. When Lazarus came out of the tomb, after being dead for 4 days, he didn't just return to continue where he left off. He re-emerged for a completely new life. A life marked by miracle. A life that would forever be a testimony to the power of Jesus. Your story doesn't end at the cross, just as Jesus didn't end there. Resurrection is the final word. Life is the ultimate destination. Hope is the path. It doesn't matter what they said. It doesn't matter what you lost. It doesn't matter how many times you fell. You are still loved, you still have value, and you can still live the life you thought you had lost. Everything begins with a decision, and you've already made it, to stay. Now it's time to rise. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus met a man who had been paralyzed for 38 years, lying near the pool of Bethesda. Every day this man waited for someone to put him in the water when it stirred, believing that the first to enter would be healed. But Jesus didn't offer to carry the man to the water. Instead, he asked a surprising question. Do you want to be healed? It seems obvious that yes, but Jesus knew that sometimes we get so accustomed to our condition that the idea of change frightens us. Being healed means getting up, walking, taking responsibility, living differently. And that's exactly what Jesus said to the man. Get up, pick up your mat, and walk. Today, Jesus tells you the same thing, not to condemn your pain or minimize your suffering, but because he knows that within you there is strength to rise, not by your own ability, but by his power working in you. It doesn't have to be all at once. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't even have to look like a new beginning. It just needs to be real. You and God, nothing more. This is the essence of everything. This is the foundation of your recovery, your healing, your rebirth. It's not the techniques. It's not the formulas. It's not the empty promises of immediate prosperity. It's the relationship. Jesus didn't come to the world to establish a religion full of rules. He came to restore the relationship between God and humanity. When the veil of the temple was torn at the moment of his death, that symbolized the end of separation. Direct access to the Father was re-established. That's why you don't need elaborate intermediaries. You don't need religious performances. You don't need to impress anyone. You just need to open yourself to this God who is already by your side, patiently waiting for you to notice his presence. And that is already everything. When Paul begged 3 times for God to remove the thorn in the flesh that tormented him, the answer he received was, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." It wasn't the answer Paul wanted to hear. He wanted the problem removed. He wanted instant healing. He wanted the visible miracle. But what he received was something even deeper, the assurance that even in the midst of pain, God's grace would be sufficient, that in moments of greatest weakness, God's power would manifest in an even more extraordinary way. That's why Paul came to say, "Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, for when I am weak, then I am strong." This is not a journey that ends with a great climax, and then it's over. It's a daily walk, one step at a time, one choice after another. There will be good days and bad days, moments of clarity and moments of confusion, victories to celebrate and defeats to learn from. But the important thing is that you're not walking alone. The one who said, "I am with you always to the very end of the age," keeps his promise. He is by your side when you smile and when you cry, when you advance and when you retreat, when you believe and when you doubt. And each new day, each new awakening, you have the opportunity to look to the sky and say, "Today I choose to continue. Today I choose to trust. Today I choose to live." One day, perhaps not as distant as you imagine, you will look back and see all this valley of shadows as a fundamental part of your story, not as the final chapter, but as the decisive moment that preceded the turning point. And your story will be a beacon for others who are lost in the same darkness that once swallowed you. Your testimony will be living proof that it is possible to survive, that it is possible to begin again, that it is possible to find meaning even after having lost everything. As Jesus said to the Samaritan woman, "Whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." You will not only receive new life, but you will become a source of that life for others. So at this moment, with all your doubts, with all your fears, with all your pain still pulsing, I invite you, take a small step today. It may be just a sigh of hope. It may be a tear that you finally allow to fall. It may be a yes, whispered to this God who never gave up on you. Jesus doesn't expect perfection. He expects availability. And you, even broken, even tired, even without completely understanding, can make yourself available for this transformative encounter. Because the simple fact that you are alive is already a cry of hope. It's a testimony of grace. It's proof that the story isn't over yet, and the author of this story knows the ending better than anyone. Trust him, continue with him, be reborn in him, because in Jesus even the end is just a new beginning. You made it here, with everything you carry, with everything you've lived through, with everything you tried to hide from others, and even from yourself. You survived pains that no one saw. You endured silences that no one heard. You were wounded by words that remained stuck in your throat, by people who can't imagine the damage they caused. And yet, you are here, breathing, feeling, wanting, even without knowing what. And that is already much more than it seems. Because when everything collapsed, when faith seemed too small to hold the world on your shoulders, you could have left. You could have closed this video, this window, this heart, but you stayed. You allowed yourself. You listened until the end, even with an aching heart, and somehow something inside you moved. Maybe it's small, maybe it's just a spark, maybe you still don't know if it's faith, hope, or just a sigh of "help me, God," but it's there, moving, and that's not by chance. Because there are seeds that sprout in the dark. There are healings that begin in silence. There are reunions that happen when everything seemed lost. And now, it's up to you. You can leave here and pretend nothing touched you. You can go back to autopilot, to the hurried world, to fear disguised as strength. You can pretend this video was just another one, or you can listen to what your heart is already quietly saying. Don't stop here. Because if something lit up inside you, if some part of you awakened, then don't ignore it. What you felt wasn't passing emotion. It was an encounter. It was God touching where no one else reaches. It was an answer without explanation, but with presence. And if this moment was real, perhaps you're ready to take one more step. A small step, but a sincere one. A step to continue, not just feeling, but walking. That's why I left something for you. Something that continues what we started here. Something that goes with you when the screen turns off, when the video ends, when the world starts to weigh heavily again. It's in the first link in the description, but it's not just a link, not just a file, not a product. It's a space for you to breathe more easily, think more clearly, walk with more direction. I wrote it with everything I had, with the pain that once tore me apart inside, with the deserts that no one saw, with the prayers that only God heard. This guide is the extension of what began here, and maybe it's exactly what you needed. A sign, a reminder, a path. You don't need to rush. You don't need to decide now. But if some part of you is asking for more, listen, because what is true doesn't disappear when the video ends. It stays, echoes, persists, transforms. And perhaps when you least expect it, you'll realize that this is where everything began to change. Not because of beautiful words, but because you surrendered. You saw yourself. You allowed yourself. And now you know. You are not alone. You never were. And if you've made it this far, it's because God still believes in who you can become. Go gently. Go with truth. But go. And if you go with this guide in your hands, may it embrace you in the hours when no one else can. May it remind you every day of what you felt right now, of this silence full of presence, of this pain that began to give way to hope. Life hasn't ended for you. It's just beginning, in a new way. Thank you for staying until the end, for trusting, for choosing to continue, even when wounded. Now, breathe and move forward. You don't need to be perfect to start again. You just need to be honest, and you already have been. The rest, we'll build together.